Watch what's approaching, the supreme moment. Reality striking closer than it seems, don't it? Go ahead, it's for the taking if you want it. If not, the dream dies and you'll be forever haunted. Then confront it.
What's good? So I ended up rainbowing both the free-to-play units last night, so wanted to test both of these guys out and see how good they are. They're actually quite amazing for free-to-play units. So first, this is the 100% free-to-play strength Android 13 unit. As you can see, potential levels, level 15, additional attack, and level 11 criticals. Just because of the ability to stack attack and defense based on the super attack. Here you have the free-to-play physical type Android 14 and 15 unit. I also went with a level 14 additional attack and level 12 criticals, just because those guys have the ability to reduce the enemy's attack. So in all honesty, I would imagine these guys aren't going to be used on a typical Dokkan event. I would more than less use these guys on, like Super Battle Road, Battlefield type settings. So I did go a little bit heavier on the additional attack side, and I do have a friend lead with the 100% potential agility Android 13 unit, or transforming Android 13, so you'll be able to see glimpses of that. Working out the rotations was a little bit difficult. I did want to mainly highlight the free-to-play units, so they are going to be linked up in every rotation, and then here and there you'll see the agility transforming Android 13 on the same rotation as well, because it does benefit everyone on the rotation based on after the transformation and whatnot. So again, it was a little bit hard to configure everything out because I didn't necessarily want to use the transforming Android 13 as a floater, because that's honestly less attacks and less rotations that the unit will be on. So that's pretty much the format. This is a longer video obviously, so just sit back, relax, and enjoy the content, I guess. Let's go ahead and talk about the units though. So the free-to-play strength Android 13 unit, again, raises attack and defense and causes supreme damage to enemy with the super attack. Passive skill is also very interesting. Reduced damage received by 40% when key is 8 or more. Attack and defense increase of 130% when facing an enemy whose name contains Goku, Vegeta, or Trunks. Plus an additional attack and defense increase of 70% when your team has Androids 14 and 15 attacking on the same turn. So because of that, I wanted to lock in the rotation with this 13 and Android 14 and 15. You're looking at the following links. Red Ribbon Army is attack increase of 300. Android Assault is defense increase of 1000. Tough as Nails, defense increase of 1500. Big Bad Bosses is attack and defense increase of 25% when HP is 80% or below. Nightmare is attack increase of 10%. Fear and Faith is +2 key. And then Shattering the Limit is also +2 key. This guy falls into, looks like, 4 categories: movie bosses, androids, artificial life forms, and of course the new Target Goku category. At 100% potential, the stats are decent. It's not great, but HP is 11,910, attack is 10,888, defense is 6,870, 12 key multiplier is 135%. It's fine because this guy does have the ability to stack attack and defense with every super attack, so even though the stats are a little bit low, your attack and defense is going to increase, as well as the ability to have damage reduction by 40% when keys 8 or more. That's very beneficial as well. The passive also is very nice, where if you are facing certain type of enemies, you do get quite a bit, 130% boost toward attack and defense, and then additional 70% toward attack and defense once you have Android 14 and 15 on the same turn. So it's quite nice, and it's very good for a free-to-play unit. Let's move on to the Extreme Physical Type Androids 14 and 15. These guys will cause supreme damage and lowers attack with the super attack. They do have the Target Goku category lead. It's +3 key HP, attack and defense 50%. It's a little bit lackluster there, but I think on certain events, story events where bonus drop rates happen or whatnot, it might be beneficial to have that as a leader. Attack and defense increase of 70% with the passive. Foresees enemies super attack plus an additional attack and defense increase of 70% when your team has Android 13 attacking in the same turn. All allies attack and defense increase of 30% and reduce damage received by 30% when your team has Fusion Android 13 attacking in the same turn. So obviously the best setup for these guys is to have both the Android 13 and Fusion Android 13 on the same turn. And as you can see, I also did include the tech version of the free-to-play Fusion Android 13 because I pretty much use that unit as a floater. That way it increases the chances of the damage reduction as well as the allies getting the attack and defense increase of 30%. For these guys, the links are pretty similar. Red Ribbon Army attack increase of 300. Android Assault is plus 1000 for defense. Toughest Nails is also defense increase of 1500. Cold Judgment defense increase of 20%. Nightmare's attack increase of 10%. Fear and Faith is plus 2 key. And then again, Shattering the Limit is also plus 2 key. So they have a pretty good balance of attack and defense and key increasing links. So very solid setup on that one. Categories looks to be Androids, Joined Forces, Artificial Life Forms, and Target Goku. At 100% potential, you're looking at HP of 10,765, attack is 10,768, defense is 6,344, 12 key multiplier is 135%. Now let's move on to the Dokkan Fest Extreme Agility Android 13 unit. So this guy is obviously the leader, category lead for Target Goku, but also the Androids category, and adds plus 3 key HP increase of 130%, and then attack and defense increase of 170%. For the super attack, causes immense damage to enemy and greatly lowers defense, also with a medium chance to stun. So that's pretty nice setup with the super attack ability. Now the passive skill is attack and defense increase of 130%, Androids category, allies key plus 2, and attack and defense increase of 30%. Attacks connect against all enemies, and then transforms when conditions are met. So obviously, ideally, it would be nice to have this guy in the same rotation with the other Android units, like the Strength free-to-play Android 13 as well as Android 14 and 15. But again, I didn't want to use this guy as a floater because that means pretty much less attack. So he's kind of isolated on his own. For the most part, I think he's linked up with like LR Perfect Cell. They tend to link up fairly well. Okay, so the transformation condition for this guy is by at the start of the 5th turn with another 2 or more Androids category allies on the team. So it's not too bad. It is obviously beginning at the 5th turn, and you do have to have 2 other Android category allies on the team, but it's not too bad of a restriction, I don't think. I mean, it's no different than a lot of other units that exist. Links, Red Ribbon Army attack increase of 1300, Android Assault is defense increase of 1000, Metamorphosis recovers 5% HP, Big Bad Bosses, of course, attack and defense increase of 25% when HP is 80% or below, Nightmare is 10% to attack, Fear and Faith plus 2 key, and then Fierce Battle is also attack increase of 15%. This guy does have an additional category. It looks like Movie Bosses, Androids, Artificial Life Forms, Transformation Boost, and then Target Goku. At 100%, you're looking at HP of 17,675, attack is 15,750, defense is 12,550, so pretty decent stats overall at 100% potential, and 12 key multiplier is 150%. Now remember, when you are farming for this unit's super attack, both this one and the strength version, they did increase the odds of drops with the Android 13 Tech SR unit, so I think it was like Area 14 Stage 8, so if you did pull this guy, make sure you go through that method because it'll at least give you a 50% chance of raising the super attack ability, so it's not... I think it's worthwhile to do it instead of wasting Elder Kais or whatever, so make sure to do that if that's the case. Again, I really wish I didn't necessarily use this guy in an off rotation with the Strength Android 13 and the physical Android 14 and 15, but again, I wanted to highlight these guys more so than my friendlies, so that's why you're seeing things the way they are. But again, if you had every single one of these guys on the same rotation, they're going to benefit greatly. They pretty much complement each other, so that's pretty much the whole setup with that. Now, because it is the inclusion of the Strength Android 13, you're not going to be able to run a double lead, transforming Android 13 with the Strength version because, the name is essentially the same, so you can't really do that. Unfortunately, that's the case, but by running the 17 lead for the Androids category lead, you're essentially going to be able to include every single one of these units, and that's pretty much the formula that I use for this team build. And it's not the best of setups. Obviously I could include a lot different units to probably produce a lot better results, honestly, but for me, I don't know, it just kind of made sense to go with this format. Of course, Tech Android 13, I've already explained why I wanted to include him, essentially because I wanted him to be as a floater and then consistently or as much as possible, be included on the rotation with the other free-to-play Android units, and you know, that provides the maximum boost possible for everyone involved. Of course, you can include the intelligence version if you wanted to, but I had the tech version rainbowed already, so might as well use that unit. The 17 unit obviously does increase allies' defense and key boost, so that does help a lot as well. And as you saw, you know, pretty good consistency with the defense. I've shown the defensive stats for Android 13 here and there. I'm sure you've seen it, but yeah, overall this guy's very solid, and I do like the Android 14 and 15 units as well. I've been waiting for a long time for them to release this, so I'm very happy about that. And a lot of, you know, my love for these guys is based on nostalgia. Honestly, I've talked about this before, but you know, as a kid, going to see it in the theaters was pretty amazing. The Android 13 movie with, you know, as a kid, the movie opening was quite ridiculous with, you know, future Android 17 pretty much, you know, annihilating Dr. Gero, to say the least, and that was pretty wild as a kid watching that, and honestly, it was a great film at the time. You know, the androids were pretty badass. You know, Trunks had that amazing finisher, and I'm glad they included that in the game as well. It was probably one of the best badass looking finishers, you know, in the series, so I'm very happy they included that on the game. So back to the original point, yeah, I mean, these guys are definitely very solid units. I would imagine you could, you know, use a variation of teams on, you know, running these guys. Like, honestly, they do have, like, artificial life forms it looks like they share. Let's see, movie bosses, I think, actually, it's funny. Well, I guess it makes sense. I was going to say that Android 14 and 15 aren't on the movie boss category team, but I guess technically they weren't the bosses. You know, Android 13 was the one for that, so I guess in a way that makes sense. It's kind of crappy they did that, but I guess that's all good. But you know, obviously Androids is another one they fall into, and Target Goku obviously as well. But yeah, I mean, overall, very solid units. I don't necessarily regret rainbowing these guys. I think they'll have plenty of uses down the road. They do seem to complement each other, so of course you want to pretty much run them together when you can. And yeah, that's pretty much how I look at it. I would imagine I would probably end up running these guys a lot in, like, you know, testing out Super Battle Road settings and Battlefield. Maybe additional stages will come out. Eventually, I would imagine the Target Goku category stage of Super Battle Road will come out. I mean, it's just a matter of time before stages are added, and the way things have been trending is based on, you know, certain categories. So, you know, at some point we'll definitely see that. Again, I do kind of the only bad thing about this showcase is you don't really see the greatness of the transforming Android 13 necessarily. You know, because of that, you know, let's talk about that a little bit. After the transformation, so this guy actually does perform very well. I mean, it's crazy how good this unit actually is. After the transformation, so when he becomes Fusion Android 13, the super attack causes immense damage to enemy and also greatly lowers defense with a medium chance to stun, so pretty much the same there. But the passive skills Key +3 attack and defense increase of 130%, plus an additional attack and defense increase of 13% for every Target Goku category ally on the team. Attacks connect against all enemies and disables enemies' guard. Performs a critical hit when facing an enemy whose name contains Goku, excluding Youth, Ginyu, and Junior names. So that's pretty much guaranteed criticals against Goku type units. You get a 13% increase to attack and defense for every Target Goku category ally. And along with that, you get a key boost and a flat attack and defense increase of 130%. So this guy's quite good. And yeah, it's again, back to the original point I was trying to make. You know, it would have been nice to have these guys linked up in the same rotation, but it really just comes down to the fact that I wanted to keep this guy in one rotation locked in to attack as much as possible. So, you know, that's pretty much the setup there, and I think he does fine linking up with the LR Perfect Cell. Of course, LR Perfect Cell is also another one that falls into the Target Goku category. I pretty much try to include all the units on the team here for those that fell into that category, honestly. So That's pretty much the reasoning behind some of that, just to maximize the ability for the Fusion Android 13, the Dokkan Fest version of it. So that's pretty much the mentality. So do be aware that there are some of the Perfect Cell units that don't fall into this category, like the, I believe the Tech Perfect Cell and Intelligence Perfect Cell. Those units don't fall into that category. Let me actually check so I can verify that 100%. Yeah, those guys don't fall into that category, and neither does the Physical Type LR Cell. I'm pretty sure. Well, I'll take a look at this again and verify this, but I'm pretty sure these guys don't fall into that Target Goku category. So yeah, it looks like those guys don't. So at least Perfect Cell, the Intelligence LR Perfect Cell at least does. So you know, that's one thing to be aware of and keep in mind, is whenever you do run the Target Goku category, there are certain cell units that fall into it, whereas certain ones don't. Fortunately, this version does, and you know, you obviously know how good this unit actually is, so it helps out having this guy included. Now the Physical Type Future Android 17, that is one of those units where it's probably easily replaceable. The reason why I included that unit is it's an orb changing unit, so I figured it would help the LR Perfect Cell be able to maybe super attack a little bit easier. That's pretty much the kind of mindset going into it, and plus that unit does have like Nightmare and Fear and Faith and stuff like that, so link wise it works out pretty well with the rest of the units as well. So it looks like we are on the Strength Type Super Saiyan Gohan enemy, and we're slowly getting to the end here. And honestly, yeah, the Strength Android 13 is defending pretty well. I'm actually quite impressed, and I think at some point the defensive stats were at like 330,000, I think, which is very, very good. Given that, you know, Infinite Dragon Ball history isn't the longest of events. I mean, the Legendary Goku event is obviously longer and more difficult, so the fact that he's able to get to that level of defense, that is actually very good for a free-to-play unit. And you know, Android 14 and 15, they're pretty good in my opinion. They're not the best by any means, but again, they do benefit from having Android 13 or Fusion Android 13 on the same attacking turn, and you can kind of make your own decision as to how you want to go about the battle based on which unit you pretty much lock in as you know, the same rotation, or you could use this guy as a floater and see how he does. Again, the only bad thing about this is each of these units need the other unit to fully benefit from the passive, so that's kind of like why you want to lock in at least one combination of the units. You obviously can't do that for all three, but depending on how you go about it. So the point being, if you end up going with Android 13 as your linking buddy, you're going to be benefiting from, you know, an additional attack and defense increase of 70%. If you end up prioritizing Fusion Android 13, then all allies get attack and defense increase of 30% and reduced damage received by 30%. So it's quite different how they're set up depending on what unit you link them up with on the rotation. So you know, it kind of adds more flavor on team building a little bit and strategies going into how to fight, you know, the enemies basically. So I thought that was a pretty, you can look at it as a little bit restricted and a little bit of a pain, but at the same time it gives you options to go into the battle under, you know, different mentalities, I guess, in a way, and that could be, you know, actually interesting in a way, because it changes how you go about utilizing the unit. And I personally think it's pretty cool they did that. It makes perfect sense to me that they are restricted and tied to one another. I mean, they were on the same film, obviously, so I don't blame them for setting it up the way they're set up. They're meant to be ran together anyway. So, in all honesty, I think the passives are fine. The only thing that I can see a drawback is, let's say if you run, you know, Super Battle Road on type specific settings like Extreme Strength versus Super Physical Type, or Extreme Physical Team versus Super Intelligence Type teams, or whatever the case is, you're going to run into an issue where they're not fully activating all of their passive skill sets. So That's the only, I guess, downside I see with that. But again, you could try out the Android category Super Battle Road or the Extreme Type, you know, Super Battle Road setting, and you could include all of them together and see how they do. But point being, I guess for this one, I wanted to include I wanted to use the Infinite Dragon Ball History event because you do face multiple enemies where they're Goku units or Vegeta units or the Trunks units. So that actually works out well in this case, where you're able to fight a couple of variations where they do get that full passive activated, but there are cases where you don't see that. So it's a good balance of seeing the skill sets overall and how they do. So we're getting pretty close to concluding. It's a little bit longer than my typical runs on the Infinite Dragon Ball History event. On average, I think I'm able to clear it on anywhere from like 13 to 15 minutes. This one's definitely a little bit longer because a lot of these units don't necessarily stack attack and defense, and obviously when you have units that do that on a team, the battle ends up being a lot quicker. But I think they're doing fine. I mean, it's a balanced enough team to where, I mean, I didn't even have to use any items until the very end, you know, and that was pretty much used as more or less like an insurance policy. I don't think I necessarily had to use it, but I have items available, so I tend to use them when I need to. So not need to, but when I feel like it, I guess is probably the best way to put it. But yeah, overall, very solid team, and I think they're a lot of fun. I could see a lot of uses with this later down the road, and yeah, we'll see how things go. But overall, I think my judgment of Strength Android 13, the Physical Type Android 14 and 15, both free-to-play units, they're very good. And I think they're solid units. I'm glad they included them on the team, and I don't necessarily regret rainbowing the units, so I think they're solid. And that's probably my assessment of it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As always, I do appreciate you watching. As always, I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.